But in the case of the farmer, he was hesitant to place any value judgment on anything. Why? Why was he so hesitant to place value judgments on anything? He just kind of shrugged his shoulders and didn't really get excited when supposedly good things happened, and he didn't really get upset when supposedly bad things happened. But the neighbor did. He was ready to give his sympathies at any moment, or express his condolences, express his excitement. But the Taoist farmer seemed to have some kind of wisdom where he was hesitant to make those kinds of judgments. Maybe he had a bigger point of view. The point of view we might have in outer space when we're hesitant to say which way is east and which way is west, because we no longer have that framed context. So outside the framed context, we learn that we're not so sure where the value lies and how to judge things and even which way is which, right? Without that frame, we're not sure which way is up, which way is down. Or even pretty and ugly, you know? We're very quick with those kinds of judgments, but I think we all know that these are very cultural kinds of judgments, very culturally based. Different cultures value different kinds of physical features in people. That's a really clear example of how relative judgments can be. Beauty is a great example of relativity. I think that we tend to see these so-called opposites, rich and poor, beauty and ugliness, as very distinct and very sure kinds of opposites. But Taoism says that they aren't really opposites at all. Not only are they relative to each other, but in fact, and this is kind of the next step to everything, not only are they relative to each other in terms of value, but they're not objectively opposite in that sense at all. In fact, they're part of the same reality, and Daoism is constantly reminding us of that. They're part of the same reality. The Tao transcends those distinctions, that dualism we've talked about in the context of Zen. The Tao wants us to transcend those distinctions. That's why it took us to outer space, because you can see that in that geographical space, we're forced to transcend those distinctions. We see very clearly that the distinctions stop making sense, up, down, left, and right. We see that certain distinctions very clearly lose their value, and the Tao wants to remind us of that the Tao transcends those distinctions. It embraces a more universal view, kind of like what the farmer had, a willingness to see beyond that dualism. It reminds us that what we might call polarity, up and down, east and west, polarity doesn't have to bring us into conflict. Polarity doesn't necessarily equal opposition. We can polarity does not equal opposition. And they have a little diagram to remind us of this, and you've probably all seen it. You've probably all seen this symbol, yeah? The yin-yang symbol. The yin-yang symbol, as it's known in English. Yin-yang, but it's better known as the Tai Chi 2 symbol. The Tai Chi 2 symbol, which just translates into something like picture of supreme ultimate. It reminds us of all of the things that I've just been talking about, that these so-called polarities aren't to be seen as distinct opposites at all. You have the yin and you have the yang. The yin is the darker half of the symbol, where the yang is the lighter half of the symbol. They do, and we'll make that point. They do. It tells us a few things. There's actually a lot to say about the symbol. It tells us that, firstly, there's really no war between things that we tend to see as opposites. You see, there's no war between yang and yin. And in the context of life itself, it reminds us that other things that we see as polar opposites don't have to be seen as warring kinds of opposites at all. Even like life and death, they're part of the same cycle of existence. Good and bad, positive and negative, they don't have to be seen as these kinds of opposites that are out to clobber each other, where one is going to be the victor. No, there can't be a victor. There can't ever be a victor. They have to coexist. And so this symbol, where the yin and the yang are interlocked, notice the brilliance of the design. They're interlocked, so that if it was a ball, it wouldn't even roll without both halves being there. They're absolutely interlocked, so that the whole system turns because of the fact that they're both there. There's no drive to get the one and destroy the other. It would be like trying to have maybe a magnet with only one pole, or a battery with only the positive charge. The battery needs to have the positive and the negative charge, right? In order for the whole circuit to flow. Both need to be there. And so in that case, they're just different kinds of energies. It's not that one is better or worse. Just like in one of those old-fashioned horseshoe magnets, what happens if you cut the ends off? Is it possible to cut off the positive charge? No, you'll just keep having a shorter magnet. You're still going to have the positive and the negative charge, right? So you can't have one without the other. There's no weak spot. There's no power imbalance. It's this dynamic, balanced system of different kinds of energies which work together to keep the system in flow. That's the point. The whole system is in flow. It's dynamic. That's what it means to be dynamic, like in music. Dynamics refers to the movement within that music. There's movement here. Hence, that paisley-shaped design. It almost looks like two fish flopping around one another. They fit together in such a way so that they're inseparable, and it moves and it's dynamic, and they move together. And there's this constant switching off, giving and taking, giving and taking. Looking at one is just looking at a different aspect of the same system. It's kind of like in that short you did about the real you. If you take a universal viewpoint away from space and away from time as well, you see that the 6-year-old you was just a shade, just a shadow, just an aspect of you. It would be like me looking at this symbol from over here. I see more black, I see more white, but when I stand here, I see, this different kind of perspective. It's different perspectives of the prism, a different color of the whole prism. It's not that one weighs more, has more power than the other. They're all just different shades. So you can't remove one because that would mean removing the whole system. You cannot have one without the other. Hence, they're complementary, not competitive. Another point to keep in mind is that there are no absolutes. We'll talk about the dots. That's one role of the dots. There's no absolutes. There's nothing that's objectively and certainly and completely this or that. There's nothing that's completely yang or completely yin, and that's what the dots remind us. There's always a little bit of the opposite in the movement, in the thing.